So, this is Storytime Podcast. My name is Rosemary, and I'm here with Steph and Victoria today. How are you ladies doing?
Doing great. Thank you
Doing,
so much. Excited to be here.
yeah, thank you so much for having us. Doing wonderful as well.
Oh, no worries. It's a pleasure having you here. So, one of the first questions I usually like to ask is in your journey, where do you say that you've had a moment where you've been awakened, or have you always been spiritually aware? Is there some profound defining moment for you?
Victoria, I'll let you go ahead and answer that one first.
I love that question. And of course, there's no easy way to answer that. But so for me personally, I never felt like I was completely asleep. And I didn't know that until later on in life, because as a kid, I was just always out of place. It's not that I didn't have friends or anything like that, but I was that odd child who was always on a bench talking to the kids' grandmothers and connecting with them more than I could connect with kids my own age. Like I just love talking philosophy and whatever, and they're sharing their wisdom. So I've always been really in tune with nature and
Mm,
animals. I've always been very strongly intuitive. Um, but at some point, I actually had to kind of step away from that path because, that wasn't something that was cultivated back then. It wasn't really necessarily understood, even though growing up in Russia, I felt like people were a lot more open to that than here. So, I mean, people talked about intuition quite a bit, but still, you couldn't just easily go and talk to anybody about some of the experiences that I had. So, I felt like it was just such a lonely path because of that. And for a while, I kind of muted it, you know? So, I muted my intuition, I muted all of these experiences that I had that were kind of like supernatural in a way.
mm,
And because I just wanted to fit in, just like all of us, right? I wanted to fit in, and I was just pushing that away. So, long story short, eventually I realized that I was missing something and that I had to kind of go back and rediscover those parts of myself.
mhm.
And then that took me on a much deeper journey of awakening, as it always happens in stages and layers. So it's a very long way to answer your question, but that's the shortest way
You
I
did.
can say it.
Thank you.
What about you, Steph? Do you
Mhm.
resonate with that at all? What do you think?
Yeah, actually, Victoria, and thank you for sharing your part. I do, in the sense that, well, my family is from Portugal, so it's also a European background. And I spent a lot of time between here in the United States and there growing up. And since from a young age, I also had that sensation of not exactly fitting in. Like I was the odd child in the family. And similar to what you described, Victoria, of like shutting off that intuition at some point just because of experiences that you would have. For example, I always felt very misunderstood by my family. They weren't really open to that spiritual sense of things, right?
Mhm.
So it was
Mhm.
really, I think, in my late teenage years that I had some experiences that eventually led me to try and tap into that again and to try and move away from the anxiety and the way that my family functioned. And that's what really, I think, pushed me in that direction of trying to reach my true self.
I understand that. Mhm. I share in that. So, yes, I understand that. Okay, so what kind of experiences? I mean, you touched a little brief on it. What kind of experiences have you had as a child? Did you have any, like maybe paranormal or anything spiritual? Have you had growing up with any messages or anything like that?
Yeah, I've actually had plenty personally. I don't think there's enough time to talk about them all. But one of the earliest ones I've had, I actually haven't shared with that many people, but that's when I started realizing that there's more to this world. And I've always had people around me, not in my family, but people have always, it's almost like they were sent to me by the divine, you know?
Hmm.
And they were always messengers to tell me to pay attention to nature and animals, you know, to really tap in, which really resonated with me. They were kind of like activators in my life. So my earliest experience, I want to say I was about 7, but definitely not older than 8. I remember uh, it's just like a handful of us. We were getting ready to go and hang out behind this building where I used to live.
Mhm.
And normally we would play in front of the building because that's where the playground was. And, we were easily seen there by our parents. So it was always like the safe area, but we were allowed to go behind as well. So we were headed there. And suddenly, out of nowhere, there were these crows. Right? They just kind of
Mm.
like appeared out of the blue and they started frantically flying over our heads, like not within reach, but very close. At least 3 of them. And they were just like swirling around. And I instantly knew, I don't know how I knew, but I knew that there was some kind of danger. It was a warning sign. And of course, none of the other kids had any clue. They were oblivious. And I'm just like standing there, like dumbfounded. Okay, what do I do about this? I can't tell the kids that, like, look, the birds just told me.
Right.
So I'm like, I have to figure something out. All I knew is that we couldn't keep going in that direction intuitively, right? So I had to reroute everybody really quickly. So I basically figured out some kind of game that we all could play because I knew they all liked that game. I don't remember what it was, but I rerouted them towards the front of the building where the playground was. And as soon as we changed directions, the birds pretty much disappeared. I mean, they were like far away, they flew away. And I was just like, I could feel this wave come over me of peace, knowing that whatever it was, the danger was averted somehow. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll never know. That was strange, but feels good.
That's
So we
awesome.
play and play, right? Yeah. So we just kind of like played for some time until it got dark. And then I came home. And after some time, my mom goes, "Oh, just so you guys know, by the way, they caught a pedophile today right behind our building,"
Oh
which
wow.
is where we were headed.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I was like, "Holy crap." I mean, I couldn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell anyone because, I mean, that's weird, right? I
Mhm.
mean, who does that happen to? So, but I knew that that was a clear message for me from that point on to really take this world seriously in that sense, that there's a lot more out there that's always looking to communicate with us,
Mhm.
and that it's up to
Hmm.
us to really open up and let that in. And the more we allow it, the more these messages come through in different ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
agree.
S-
How about you, Steph? Have you had any childhood experiences, spiritual?
Yeah, I guess I didn't really realize that it was a spiritual thing until now that I can look back on it, right? So my family comes from a region in Portugal that used to be the country's like breadbasket, and my grandfather had a farm. That was my favorite place to be growing up. Every summer that I would spend there, I would go with him in the afternoon to the farm, and he would be doing his own thing, taking care of the crops, and I would just be wandering around looking at all the different insects and all the different plants, and just it was a very, even now I think about it, and it was such a beautiful calm space for me. And in the center, it had this enormous persimmon tree, and it was right above where the well was. And we went to go check on the well. My grandfather was irrigating the gardens and such. And all of a sudden, I had this like instinct that was, oh, we need to go right back to the house. Something's going on with the dog or something like that. I could hear the dog barking, and he was a little annoyed at me, but I insisted on us going back to the to the house, away from the well and the tree. And as soon as we got back and like we calmed down the dog and everything, an enormous branch of the persimmon tree fell right where we would have been. And I just remember being in awe at that time. And like now I can look back on it and see that I had the like hunch that something was gonna was gonna happen where we were, and that something told me to move and to get my grandpa out of there. So it really is interesting how it wasn't until recently that I thought about that and that I realized that that had happened in that way. And it's funny how we can sometimes, it's like Victoria had mentioned how she didn't know it at the time, but then she later found out.
Yeah.
And it's funny how even years later we can look back on something and realize, oh my gosh, that was my intuition guiding me in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy how we don't always know until we look back and we're like, oh my God, that's what that was. It's like that
Right.
aha moment.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's funny. So cool.
Wow. That's
Hmm.
Okay, so
awesome.
okay, let me ask. All right. So when you're a child and again, you're seeing this world for what it is sometimes, and you said you look back and you see it and go, "Oh wow, I was guided." What has your what you wanted to be like when you get into this programming, what you want to be when you grow up as a child, has that passion shifted into the now that you're in? Has it shifted from as a child, like your journey, your core passion, to now?
That's a very interesting question. And
You ask awesome questions. I
yeah,
Thank
love
you.
that.
I love it.
Steph,
And
do you want to
it's
go first
funny.
or do you? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, if you
Sorry.
don't mind, thank
Yeah,
you.
go ahead.
It is funny because I remember this being like in sixth grade, the teacher going around the class and asking each one of us to say what it was that we wanted to be when we grew up. And I was knew I was going to be one of the last ones to speak, and I remember just being so nervous the whole time because I could not come up with anything like my classmates were coming up with, like being a doctor, being a lawyer. Like all I could think of was I don't know anything of what I want to be. I just know that I want to change the world. And I just remember, I can't even remember what I responded at the time. I might have said maybe a veterinarian because I've always loved animals. And I just remembered I felt this strong urge to just make the difference, just help animals, people. I just always felt that. And I've, even in my, career that I've always switched around a lot in, now is when I feel like things are finally coming to what it is that I want to be doing, that I'm passionate about.
Mhm.
Because any other jobs that I've had in the past, I didn't feel that I was doing what I was meant to be doing. And now with Reiki and learning all of that, it finally feels like I'm coming into that part of my life that I enjoy what I'm doing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Beautiful.
What about you, Victoria?
Oh my gosh, it's going to be a long response.
That's okay.
um, so the thing is, I know that people ask that question all the time, and I can't ever remember knowing how to answer it as a kid because I
Mm.
just knew what I didn't want to be,
Mhm.
but I had no clue what I actually wanted to be. And I think it's because I was always kind of like here, but not. What I
Mm.
mean by that is because I never felt like I belonged. I always was that black sheep, that outcast, that, kid that's different from everybody else. I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
fit in Russia. I didn't fit in here. I always wanted to go home. I didn't know where home was. I always knew there's more to life. Here I am sitting making friends with grandparents. So like, I'm like that weird kid with a deep connection with nature and animals and, certain claircognizant abilities that I wasn't even aware of. So it's like, I never really quite knew what I was passionate about because then I had a lot of also trauma in my childhood. And at some point, I went through a very deep depression that ended up lasting a while. I mean, it was kind of dormant at times
Mhm.
and it kind of comes and goes. So I think I was in denial for a while. And it wasn't until it came back. I mean, it started in junior high and then it came back multiple times. And it wasn't until my mid 20s when I finally realized that I have a problem and that I have to do something about it because it isn't going to go away. It
Mm.
was to a point where I was deeply suicidal. I never attempted it, but it's because I felt like it would just happen. I wasn't even afraid of death anymore. I was literally afraid of living and just facing another day. I mean, it was just
Mm.
such a darkness that I was constantly in. Um, was a very lonely path because nobody understood me and I was in constant survival mode. Um, and that is what really awakened me or started. I got to a point where I started asking a lot of deeper truths and deeper questions. I was seeking truths because I knew that this isn't the way that there's got to be a reason to why all of this is happening.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
that led me to a very kind of like lone wolf kind of journey for years where I would literally just go at night to the beach because I used to live very close to one after they close it down. And I would just sit there and let it all out and talk to the moon,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
had no one else. And right? And I mean, that was like the elements were my healers at the time. And the more I was asking these questions, the more was being revealed to me. It's almost like a wave washed over where I could feel that I was being actually protected and guided and taken care of somehow.
Hmm.
And that I got the message that I just downloaded, knowing that this was all happening for a reason and just stick it out. So
Mm.
that's what kind of kept me going because I couldn't stand the idea of giving up, and B, I couldn't stand the idea of letting my parents down. You know, they came to this country for the future and all, and I'm like, I can't do this to them. So I'm like, I have to keep going. But that really led me on a path to spirituality and everything metaphysical in life, right? I mean, I literally
Mm.
turned to astrology, numerology, tarot, like psychics, meditation, anything that would give me any kind of answers to what I was seeking because I just did not belong, period. Um, and I really always was obsessed with knowing how people tick. That's one of the reasons
Mm.
why I was drawn to astrology, just like psychology. I just really had to understand that part,
Hmm.
like the inner workings of the mind. Well, long story short, I mean, I eventually had a vision of myself when I learned how to meditate better, of myself healing with hands. And that felt very natural to me. You know, it was like a lasting vision. It wasn't just something that flashed in front of my eyes. I literally saw myself doing it. And I don't know if it was a memory or what, but it felt really good. So that's when I started looking that up. I was like,
Mhm.
healing with hands. What am I doing over here? Like, okay. Like, that's not weird at all. But I, at that time, you know, again, 2011, I was in Chicago. Nobody around really did anything with Reiki or anything like that. So I first found quantum touch, and then like something bit me in the ass, and I was just like one thing after another. I found a practitioner who practiced Reiki in California, but she traveled 2 or 3 times out a year to Chicago and other places. So I booked her because I was like, I'm learning this bit. You know, I need to know how to do this because I was told to. So I don't know what I'm doing, but I got to do it. Um, so when I got certified, I was like, well, great, but how do I work this into my life now? Because nobody around me is doing this.
Hmm.
So
Mm.
I guess I had to at that time learn how to work with this energy and experience it myself because that looking back I understand that was one of there's a deeper purpose behind that because that's what really helped me initially to get out of depression holistically because I was from the very beginning I was set on not going the western route. I knew I was not going to pop any pills. I wasn't going to do it that way. I really wanted to handle this the holistic way, really get to the root.
Hmm.
And so Reiki was the first thing that started healing me in such deep levels and mentally, you know, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It was just kind of like its own energy with its own intelligence that always
Mhm.
knew what to do. And that's when it helped me understand how it actually works because when you first get attuned to it, you're like, okay, great. So I'm supposed to channel this, and I don't know what if I'm really doing it. You know, you start to question it. You're like, am I doing it? You can't see it. So, so that's how I was like, okay. So I had a lot of time to play around with that, and then even with animals, and then that's when I really started to see just how much it works and how well it works, and the gratitude that the
Mm.
animals express from it. that led me to an even deeper path of self-discovery and, what's actually going on in this world and why I always felt so alone. Some of these were really hard truths to swallow, of course, but and it's a path that I was always running away from because a part of me still wanted to be normal so badly. And I was like, this is all cool and all, but do I really need to be doing this? Can this just be like a part of me, but not really me? So it was just like this, back and forth kind of yo-yo effect where I was like, okay, I'm all in. And then I'm like, no, no, I'm going to go back and hang out with the normal kids now. And eventually it just kept like, if it's meant for you, it's going to
It's
keep
gonna.
Yes.
Mhm.
finding you, right? It's
Yep.
going to keep luring you and pulling you back in. So I'm like, okay. So I was learning astrology in layers and mostly, not really to kind of so much focus about, the future and predicting anything. I didn't care about that. I needed to know why I am the way I am. And if
Mm.
there's truth to it, if I can apply this to other people, like what are my strengths, my weaknesses? What is my path? What is my mission here? What are some of my wounds? What am I dealing with? My biggest challenges that I'm trying to overcome. And it's funny how the universe made me kind of study that in layers. It was not like a all at once type of thing where I would take a course and be done with it. It was like, okay, right now I'm meant to focus on this part of astrology. And as soon as I was done with that, I had no more interest in it until the next phase. So to this day, that's what's been happening. And eventually it led me to, I would say, one of my deepest awakenings was when I ended up going to Peru. The first time I went there, it was just for recreational purposes, but somebody brought up ayahuasca, and I've never heard of it before.
Mhm.
But I was deeply intrigued, and I was like, I don't know what this is, but I gotta do it. I gotta do it. It's like one of those things again, right?
Mhm.
And so, but then of course I was like scared because then I read about it and I saw videos and whatnot. I mean, I watched it all. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna not do that for now. And if it's meant for me, it'll come. The long story short, 4 years later, it came to me and it was clear that I had to do it. So just also the way that the universe conspired for me to go on this trip because initially I wasn't going to make it. But not only did I end up making it, but because the dates were moved without me even asking for that. And they were moved in such a way that the last ceremony, it was a 2 week trip, and the last ceremony ended up falling on my birthday.
Oh
So
wow.
it was just, yeah, it was literally one of those like really strong death and rebirth moments. I mean, it was just like, I realized just how much more I was carrying that I wasn't even aware of because it's not even up until that point, I was really focused on my micro world, like what's happening to me in my life. Whereas this is more like, oh, did you know that you were carrying all this just from your
Yeah.
family stuff that you picked up
Yeah.
on, like for
Oh.
generations and, past
Yeah.
lives, if you believe in that kind of thing. And I was like, holy crap, as if I didn't have enough to deal with, right?
Yep.
So that in itself was such a powerful 2 week experience, but it was coming back from it during the integration process that my world really went, for a toss. That was the hardest part because it almost at first I was like, okay, I'm coming back to the real world, and then I realized that that was the real world, and this is just like the matrix that I'm coming back into. And now I have to figure out how to integrate all that in there, right?
Yep.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not easy. To this day, because I kind of asked for a lot. Whenever you sit with these plants like ayahuasca, and I did a master plant dieta as well in there, and when you do that, you always, just like with everything, put your intention into it and what you want to get out of it. So, of course, I asked for a ton of stuff because I'm either going to do it or I'm not. There's no half assing it. So, to this day, I'm still integrating some of the stuff. It's amazing. It's just mind blowing. I mean, when I was there, one of the deepest experiences I've had, and there were many, but I did ask for unconditional love. I was guided. That was one of the things I asked for. I was guided to feel that. And I was shown that. I was connected to this beautiful energy that I've heard so many people explain who experience a near death experience. When you are in the presence of this vast, limitless, beautiful love and light that just caresses you and cradles you and lets you know that everything is fine. It's literally like just a direct connection to source, or that's what it felt like to me. And I never felt that kind of love. It was so immense. It was so mind blowing. I thought a little more and I would explode. I just, yeah, I felt like crying from this beauty. And it's like that in itself was so healing.
Yes.
I must have been in that for like 15 to 20 minutes. Although it's hard to know when you're under the influence of these plants, but every wound that every lack that I experienced, I felt like that really took so much away from me because I realized how much more we are, where we come from, where we're ultimately going, and that this is just a kind of like blink of an eye type of thing, that is just something we're meant to experience, but this is not finite, and that's what most people don't realize.
Hmm.
So that was powerful. And again, integrating all of that was very challenging because that's not something that you're taught to do either. You're just going to have to figure it out. And that led me on deeper, again, asking for deeper roots and going further because now you get a taste of this. You're like, I want more. And eventually, so I started to understand my purpose a little bit more here, why I had to go through all the pain that I went through, why I had to also find a way out of it, because I was being shown that this is something that I'm going to eventually help other people with, because this is what I truly was always passionate about.
Hmm.
Um, so I was guided to, at this point, to certain past life regressions and hypnotherapy, and I had an amazing experience in India, which I didn't expect at all. Um, I went there to get married and I wanted to experience Ayurveda. So when I went to resorts, the doctor there, who is a very dear friend of mine now, she's a soul sister of mine, and she said, well, I actually started doing hypnotherapy. So this is something you're interested in. And I've just been calling this in, asking the universe, if it's meant for me, please show me the way, give me the right practitioner, and bam. So that happened. And long story short, I went into some very significant past lives, and two of them were ancient Egypt and Atlantis, which explained my connection that was so deep with both of them because I just
Yes.
always, yeah, right?
Yes, I do know those connections. Yes.
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 It wouldn't leave me alone for the longest time. I'm like, what is it? I need to go there. I need to see the pyramids, but it's not just like I need to see them. Like I need to just be there. And what is it about Atlantis? I couldn't understand this. Like, it's like a magnet. I'm like, okay, so this was one of those things that really helped me understand my role and my mission in this life once I had that experience and then came home and did some research to see if what I saw actually happened. Because one of the lifetimes I had was when I went to Atlantis, she asked me, who am I? And I said, I'm Cyrus, but I guess I didn't hear the O. Um, but I mean, I saw where I was. I saw it was Atlantis. I even saw how he died. I didn't know anything about him. So, of course, like at that time, it felt real, but it wasn't until I came home and I was like, well, let me look this up. Because then, like the left brain kicks in and you're like, oh, you just made all that up. It can't be real. So I was like, if it's real, there's got to be some truth about it. And sure enough, I looked up the Atlantean high priests, and one of them was Osiris. And then I was led to read a book, which has also been stalking me for a while. That's called The Ancient Secrets of the Flower of Life by Drumvalo Melchizedek. And that connected all those details for me because I understood how Osiris was connected to ancient Egypt
Yep.
and Atlantis and how he was there during the fall of Atlantis, and looked up. I saw that he died the way that I saw him die. So it was just like, I was like, oh my God, mind freaking blown. I mean, it's interesting how the universe just guides us and shows us these breadcrumbs. If we're willing to open up, everything will be always in divine timing, and it'll reveal itself
Hmm.
as needed, exactly when you need to know this. And that, of course, led me to additional courses and really getting into healing trauma and doing a lot of shadow work, deeper deeper levels. Like I was really going into um, back to like Dark Night of the Soul, in and out for quite some time. I realized I was on a twin flame journey, which is a whole other animal. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was just like one of those things where I really had to face the darkest parts of myself and my wounds. And some of them I knew, like I said earlier, were inherited and passed on from God only knows when. And it's when I realized just how much trauma we carry from childhood, from family, just the family trauma and karma that's
Right.
passed down to us, the
Hmm.
ancestral stuff that we can, past lives. I mean, it is so thick and deep. And it's like, no wonder you can't heal it all if you just focus on yourself and just this life. So when I learned just how many limiting beliefs I had, and I knew I had some, but I didn't realize to what extent. And that honestly, for some time, that broke me because it was almost like everything just came to me and I was facing it all at once. And I realized how everything I did from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep was stemming from these limiting beliefs. They were
Mm.
literally running my whole life and the patterns, like even little things like perfectionism, procrastination. You know, we all think,
Yeah.
oh, it's because we're lazy. Well, we're not. We're actually not lazy by nature. It's that it's our ego preventing us from going further, right? Because it's like, oh, it's trying to protect us. And so that in itself was such a deeply awakening experience for me. And I realized that I had to go through that um, in order to eventually step into being my most authentic self, which meant being whole,
Hmm.
complete, loving myself, which was not something, well, most of us are not taught that. And I had the hardest time with that. I'm still working through that. And I realized that this is what I'm truly meant to do. This is my purpose. This is finally starting to now make sense, which is why I met Steph at the perfect time because we're so aligned when it comes to that. It just, everything just started flowing because the more I started taking my mask off in every possible way, I started attracting my soul tribe and the people who
Hmm.
really do resonate
Hmm.
with my views, my passion, my heart. And I'm like, how did I even not live like this? There was no other way. Like everything else was just bullshit. I mean, it was
Right.
nothing but like a dress rehearsal. And now I'm finally like, wow, I like this. If I could just, like, why did
Okay.
it take this long?
So,
Right.
okay, so I have a question. So, and I go there because I do ask the questions. So, with what you guys practice and how again, like going through and shedding these layers, what are your thoughts on the current paradigm, the world system and its changes? What are your thoughts on medical? I know you expressed a little bit of yourself and those types of the illusion that we're in the programming.
Mm. Oh boy.
Yeah, I have a tough question. I go right for it.
Yeah. It's it's interesting. I was actually just discussing that with my partner last night, especially in terms of the medical
Hmm.
field and the illusions of all that. And Victoria, you mentioned through your journey with depression, and I had a similar experience. I really always fought the idea of traditional therapy and going on pills and everything. And I did in 2016 have, and I will now believe it was a Kundalini awakening gone wrong. And I ended up on some of these medications at the time. And I just remember how had been so opposed to them before. Even during the time that I was taking them, I was just, why am I taking this? I know this isn't actually helping me. And it got to the point that I just, well, I don't recommend this to anybody, but I quit them cold turkey.
Hmm.
And ow, that was when it got really, whew, that was wild. And it took me a bit to pull myself out of that, just because it felt like it actually shot me down further into that deep pit of despair that we often find ourselves in with depression, right?
Hmm.
And after I eventually worked myself out of that, and it's been my opinion ever since, really, is that It is just this system and these ideas that they have, told us as a society that, oh, if you have any mental health issues, it's going to be talk therapy and here's your prescription.
Hmm.
And none of that ultimately works because even traditional therapy, as it functions these days, it can help you realize what your problem is, but it does not actually assist you in working through your issues
Yes.
and making you feel like you're empowered to conquer your own issues, right? The way we are told is, oh, you have anxiety, you have depression, there's really nothing you can do about it, that's all in your head. And it is all in our head in the sense that so is the cure. The cure is within ourselves.
Hmm.
That we are the people we're the ones that can actually fix ourselves. And yes, we can need help at times, and it's okay to look for help when you need it. But there's really no need to go outside of ourselves. Everything that we seek is within us. And just I feel like that has been, especially after COVID, people are starting to realize that more and more.
Hmm.
And there's been anxiety and depression and people feeling the need for community because we've been, fed this idea that we need to be individuals and we need to strive to be the best on our own. And that is just, my gosh, it's the biggest load of crap I've ever heard in my life. Because we are so powerful, right? And that's something they don't want us to
Connect.
realize. Yeah, and yeah, it's that the sense of community, and when we are actually all wanting to benefit each other, right?
Hmm.
That we want to uplift each other. That is when the real magic happens, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Those are some amazing points, Steph. Thank you for saying all that.
Thank you.
And that's really kind of at the base of it all. I mean, again, another loaded question, so this can go in so many directions. But I think that was when I was kind of saying how part of the awakening is swallowing the deeper truths.
Yep.
You ask for the truths, you get them, right?
Hmm.
So for me, that's what really was really hard. As a matter of fact, like The Matrix, that movie when it first came out, that movie activated me because I realized it's not fiction. That was pretty much reality.
Oh, yeah.
And we are kind of being subdued in many different ways because we are truly powerful beings. And what people don't realize is everything that's going on in this world is nothing but a distraction from the truth. It's
Yep.
all just to divide us because that's how we're easily conquered. Because if we were to unite, there's nothing ever that would divide us. There would be no wars. There would be no nothing. Life would be so simple.
Hmm.
And everything is orchestrated on such deep levels. It's truly sickening. And what truly is going on is the biblical spiritual war that we're in, that nobody, like, people seem to understand because it's in the Bible, but they don't really understand to what extent
Right.
it's happening. And it's to keep us and basically keep us at a lower vibration so we don't rise, we don't ascend
Hmm.
as we are meant to, because that's the time that we are in. And this time was foretold for eons. And we are being kept, or at least that's the idea. We're not being kept. I believe that we are headed for, I mean, if you look around, you see nothing
Yes.
that is true. But if you understand it from a perspective of where we truly are headed, there's no other way that we can get there because no matter which system you look at, whether it's politics, so-called medicine, I mean, anything, really, give me anything. And it's broken. It's backwards.
Yeah.
It's not what it's literally like, money first, right? Control first. And that's not where we're headed. We're actually, as I see it, we are headed towards, from duality, where
Yep.
we've been for a very long time, towards unity. And that is what's known as the Christ consciousness, the 5D and beyond,
Hmm.
where there is no separation. where this kind of world cannot exist, which is why everything is crumbling, which is why everything is breaking down, because we cannot take that with us.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So well said,
So,
Victoria.
yeah, I mean, that's so on one hand, it sucks to witness it all and to see all the suffering, you know? I mean, nobody wants to go through that. It's really hard, especially if you're an empath, to watch what's happening to the world and feel all of that. But on the other hand, it's such a blessing to know that it's actually falling apart. That because I always wondered, like, when are we going to get there? Like, how is that going to happen? And I always felt like it's coming. Like it felt
Mm-hmm.
it deep and within intuitively, but I'm like, okay, I don't know, is that
When?
wishful thinking? Like I don't see it coming. It's like freaking chaos. And then suddenly 2020 came and I was like, oh my God, that's what I've been feeling.
Yeah.
And I started to understand on a deeper level what
Mm.
really was happening. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But if we really keep focusing on where we're headed, because right now I feel more than ever, it's really imperative to keep that vibration really high,
Yes.
Oh,
at least.
yes.
And that's why it's so important to work through all this, you know, all the bullshit within us
Yeah.
that we're going through. That's why the shadow work, trauma, all of that is so important because until there's a war inside all of us. So whatever's going on the outside is a reflection of what's going on inside. So until we figure out a way to conquer that within, that's not going to happen on the outside. But if we do that one by one, the outside world literally cannot exist as it is now because by law, by the universal laws, it has to match what we're all vibing. And as we rise in our vibration, this is going to continue to clash and crash and collapse.
Yeah.
And I feel like as way showers, as activators, we are here to really kind of like hold the fort
Yeah.
and to help others and assist in their own awakening process. And everybody's kind of activated in their own time.
Yep.
So I'm babbling again because
No,
that's
you're
what I do.
not. So I'll ask you, um what do you guys practice in healing and such? Like what is your, I would say, I don't want to say occupation, it's not a job, but what is it that you're spiritually like you practice to help people?
Yeah, so it's interesting because every session ends up looking differently. But as of right now, I am a Reiki practitioner. Victoria has a lot more modalities under her belt. But every session ends up being different. And just the results that we see with people are absolutely incredible. And when we start the session, we typically start with a meditation, just to get people in that parasympathetic state and to get them ready to work on whatever issues they come to us with, right? And as we are transmitting the energy healing to the person, it's interesting that a lot of the times what ends up coming up was something they didn't even think about at all, right, Victoria? It's something totally different.
Yeah, it's just like how many times we've heard like, oh, I didn't even know that was there. I didn't know I was carrying that. I didn't know that was deep within. It's like that inner child trauma that's
Hmm.
been suppressed for so long. And we do this both remotely and in person. And it's like Steph said, every single session has been completely unique because it's not so much about trying to control it, but more like stepping out of the way and allowing spirit to guide us
Hmm.
That's
as
right.
we channel, because we do. And that was the interesting part about it, because both of us have worked separately. But this is just the beginning where we started kind of joining the forces and practicing different modalities at the same time. So, meaning Steph could be channeling Reiki while I might be guided to channel Sekim or the Violet Flame, which I work with a lot for transmuting energies or something else. It's just whatever comes through. And then we pick up on intuitive messages. We kind of like when we tend to do this work, we feel like we almost merge with the person that we're working on and we can feel what's going on with them a lot of the times. And then that oftentimes, once the energy healing part is over, um, it could lead to other tools. So sometimes we talk a little bit about astrology, numerology. We incorporate some oracle readings in there as well, just to kind of like I mean, there's so many messages that come through that are exactly what we heard. So it's just like it's another one of those things that just finalizes it perfectly. And um, there's a lot of different tools. We're both also currently studying Akashic records and stuff like that, and
Nice.
ancestral stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's kind of like eventually you're going to be led down that road, and that's what we plan on incorporating. So we do want to. We're going to create classes going forward, as well as eventually have retreats.
Mm.
So yeah, it's
Nice.
just so many different, it's a lot of different techniques. You never know what's going to come out. There's also coaching that's involved because, we don't just do the energy healing and then let it go. It's more like we talk about what comes up. We explain to them what needs to happen. Whatever messages come through, we share with them. And oftentimes it's exactly what they need to hear. And they tend to receive exactly the messages and the healing that is needed to them at the time. That's why we try not to so much get in the way of that and just allow it to flow and happen as needed.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it especially works great when, the person doesn't have any set expectations as well. And that's what we try to, let people know is just be open to whatever it is that you're going to experience. And it's wonderful how people have been open to do that. And it's just been such a blessing to be able to, join forces with
Hmm.
Victoria and work together. And oh, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And it's like when you can tell when somebody's resisting it because it's
Yes.
all
Yeah.
based on free will. And I mean, it's all up to you how much you're ready to take on and let go of. And we always tell people, allow whatever needs to happen will happen. And if you resist it, it's
Yeah.
only going to prolong the process, but it's essentially up to you what you're ready for, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Mhm.
before I wrap it up, is there anything that both of you would like to say to people out here who may be newly awakening or maybe not sure where to go? Um, Anything that you would like to say?
Well, they could always join us in our Facebook group, Higher Hearts in Harmony. And we're, always open to talk to people. There's always the option for people to discuss on there what it is that they're going through. And we're more than happy to have a conversation with someone. And
Mm-hmm.
if people just want someone to listen to them, we're more than open to doing that.
Yes, it's beautifully said. Yeah, we're not ever any forceful. We're not forceful with anyone. It's not so much because the true approach of spirituality is really finding your own path. There's no
Mm-hmm.
formula, it's unique to you. So we can definitely help guide you and hold your hand. But it's going to be your own experience. You're exactly where you need it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So we would love, if anybody wants any kind of, that's why we're actually building a community as well. It's so important to us because that's something that Steph and I didn't experience before. We felt alone. And I don't
Right.
think it's necessary to go through this alone. You have other people around you, just like you, who are going through this. It's happening for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
Mm-hmm.
always help. There are people who get it. And that's why I'd like to actually share our mission statement,
Oh, yeah.
maybe,
Mm-hmm.
if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, as Higher Hearts in Harmony, we are intuitive healers, alchemists, trailblazers, way showers, and activators who have been brought together to guide awakening souls on their journey to their hearts. We aim to build a community based on authentic, heart centered, soul aligned living focused on empowerment, wholeness, and self love. We are here to spread the message of love as we help bridge the gap between worlds while having fun, tapping into that inner child, and unleashing limitless potential of the unique and creative genius inside all of us. And it really is inside all of us. So that's why we're here to hold whoever's hand, whoever needs any kind of um, help, support. They're more than welcome to join our community. We would be more than happy to have them.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for. It's a pleasure to have you both on. Um, and I'm sure there's more to talk about, and I would love to have future podcasts. I really would. So, and it's a pleasure to meet both of you. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. This was such a blessing, and it's amazing the work that you're doing, Rose.
It's not all
I,
me. Again, it's a group thing, but thank you.
Mhm.
I agree. It's beautiful. I completely resonate with everything you're doing. I'm so grateful and thank you for
Yeah.
having us on here. It's such an honor. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
All right. Thank you, and I hope we do future podcasts. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep, definitely.